Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, AJ Gokcek joins us again, favorite lawyer from California, and we talk about a number of things here. We talk about trademarks and how to acquire a trademark, and even that process is politicized, believe it or not. We talk about New California. You've probably heard of this, California attempting to be the 51st state, and that entire process, and what's really going on with all of that. And of course, he was involved to some extent, and he'll discuss his involvement with it. He also breaks down a great deal of SCOTUS rulings as well, and the Supreme Court's made some rather interesting ones here that have taken place, and they're not that bad. In fact, they're pretty darn good, and we seem to be moving in a pretty good direction here. So give this discussion a listen. Thanks for listening as always, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I appreciate you, asking me to help you on the trademark application. I know you went through and tried to file a trademark for American Education FM, and then it got rejected, and you let it go. I think you got some bad legal advice the first time,
Probably.
on that, and so then we talked about it. Just what was it, late last year, and that there would be some benefits to filing a trademark. I know you were getting some heat in your local area, and so it'd be a good way to send notice to people that you are the owner of American Education FM, that's going to be that's going to be your trademark, and just kind of giving notice to other people that you are the owner of this, and that you're going to have exclusive rights, and that you will prevent others from using your mark or messing with your mark, and and who knew? When I represent you in this trademark case, I never thought that it would lead to a political manifesto, and it would be this much fun.
Yeah.
So we were talking, and all right, well, let's see. We might, trademark office might give us a hard time, but let's go for it. Just for some of your listeners, if they're not as familiar with trademarks, some of the common trademarks, like Google and Apple and Nike all have trademarks, like the Nike swoosh logo, the Apple logo, the McDonald's golden arches, and they're used to distinguish your goods and services from someone else's. So it basically differentiate your product or your service from that of your competitors, and they're really just source identify the source of your goods or services, and the purpose is really to help consumers distinguish your products from someone else's. And so when we filed for a trademark application, a federal trademark application for American Education FM, and for use in the services would be for entertainment and educational services, a podcast series, online commentary, website information, in a variety of fields like current events, education, news, politics, economics, philosophy, whistleblowing, corruption, all of this. And, so we submitted that. That was, I think, early in 2025. We submitted your trademark application. And so, and then a examining attorney at the trademark office picked it up, reviewed it, and found that there were no conflicting trademarks, that you were using it in commerce. But the problem was that the examiners thought that it was not distinctive, that it was just merely descriptive, generic, which you're not allowed to get a trademark on something that's either descriptive or generic. For example, if you tried to trademark beefy burgers for a restaurant that serves hamburgers, or maybe cold and creamy for ice cream, or super cushion for air spray. But there are ways around that, if you've been using it for a while. So anyway, your application got rejected for being primarily geographically descriptive. And so the examiner argued that the primary significance of American FM was that it was a generally known location, that it's really the significance is of the United States, a place. And I don't get too many kinds of rejections, so I kind of had to look it up a little bit. But think of it like this: there's the mark, for example, Lexington for bourbon whiskey, and where is that made? Lexington, Kentucky. So that's, that would be like an example of a primarily geographic mark. Or if someone tries to sell let's say you try to trademark Las Vegas for a T-shirt. You might have a hard time with that because people are going to think that first thought is going to be the location, Las Vegas, Nevada. But if you add some words to it, maybe like Oompa Loompa Las Vegas T-shirts or something, you might be able to get around that. You might be able to, but you wouldn't have any rights to the words Las Vegas alone, standing alone. So I got Sean. Do you want to say something?
No, go for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I got this rejection from the trademark office. I kind of had to look it up. I kind of had to do a little bit of research because it's not something that I get very often. And it occurred to me that you're not trying to claim your mark isn't really trying to claim like a location or like you're not trying to get consumers to think when they hear American Education FM, you're get them to think of like a place where you offer educational services or like a school or university in the United States. That's not the that's not really what comes to mind with your podcast. And so that's that's kind of that's what we argued. That we argued that basically the that the world is not meant to designate a geographic location, but instead, when you hear American and American Education FM, there's like a set of characteristics and values, that has like a different connotation, and there's really the focus on like the attributes of the education system here in America, and there's certain values and goals that are associated with education in America, and that was sort of our argument, and it's where kind of this is where the fun part begins, and we argued that no, look, we're not trying to, this is really not a geographic designator. This is not a school. This is not some place in the United States that we're trying to trademark. We're using it in a way that's associated with what's going on in the school in the United States. And, some of if you want, I can kind of read this over really quickly, and then we can kind of go through each one, if that's okay.
Sure, go for it. In fact, there was a particular parameter that I actually thought about even adding to it. I know we've already resubmitted it, but I thought about this today because, again, this is something that I've done in the past, and of course something I'm currently doing now. And I thought, well, yeah, I could add this, and it's certainly on my website, but it has to do again with basically being an advocate for people who want to hold school districts and those in the education profession accountable. Because again, lots of people are getting away with a lot of bad stuff, and a lot of people don't know how to basically navigate the system and educate individuals about what to do and what to file and how to behave around these people and how to hold them accountable and a number of other things. Yeah. So I kind of added that within the description of the show on the website. But yeah, go ahead and read some of those.
Yeah. So what we said was that these values are the following, that and some of these are just, we all know this. Some of these, and you talk about in your podcast too, and you have it up on your website. So what we said was like some of the things we said were like one, so how is American education sort of different from the education systems in other countries? Well, one is like the type of learning environments, from like taxpayer funded public and charter schools, in a brick and mortar setting, to homeschooling and online environments. That was one. There's a focus on schools. A focus on sports. Sports are a big deal in American schools, not so much in foreign places. We have more of a casual learning environment here, where teachers are called by their first names, students dress in casual clothing. In most other countries, you have like, school uniforms and formal titles of respect. You call your teacher either by like teacher or Mr. or Miss something. And also the way that we pay for schools, so we have a system of local and county property taxes that we pay for the majority of public school funding. Whereas in most other countries, it's, from the central government or maybe regional. And here's where it gets, here's where it gets really good here. So we also said that, another difference with American education compared to other systems is that, our curriculum really, it disdains its majority populations, traditions and customs, our founding fathers, Confederate leaders, some of our renowned inventors and businessmen, especially if they're white males, and replaces their names from schools. We've had some schools here in Palo Alto too, where the names were taken off and they were replaced with non-white and people who were just less relevant. Also, what else is going on here? Promotion of gender pronouns, homosexuality, transgenderism, multiculturalism, other socialist, communist beliefs. To students as young as 5 and 6. And our country's founded on limited government, Christian values, and liberty. Also, unionized teachers with tenure and special privileges, and they donate millions of dollars annually to the Democrat Party and leftist causes, and the rest of us have to subsidize. Free education for illegals, school shooting drills, school shootings and hoaxes, and the impact and the purpose of that, to restrict our right to guns. And some other differences or other things that we mentioned are the Department of Education actions, their funding, history, illegality, the indoctrination of students.
Yeah.
Political affairs, including 9/11, JFK assassination, the single bullet theory, World War II, the Holocaust, hoax, cloud, and so-called COVID, and the Marxist nature of America's racialized politics are kind of very divisive cultural developments. Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ fanaticism, and the influence of teacher education programs. Sorry about that. On the failure of both K through 12 and higher education schooling, the dynamics of school boards, Robert's Rules of Order, voting, state legislation, and also the influence of the regional and global medical industry, especially in the area of vaccines, within the business of education. So these are the arguments that we made. And also FM. You got FM in there too. American Education FM. FM doesn't have any geographical significance. That can mean a lot of different things. FM can be like radio and broadcasting, or the femtometer, or family medicine, and also. So anyway, so that was sort of the gist of our arguments, and also cited some case law. There was some, we can come back to that, but if we go back to those bullet points, for example, the first thing we said was the types of learning environments. There are obviously government schools in all foreign countries, that have, even have charter schools that are publicly funded but more managed. But we have by far the largest and most well-established homeschooling environment. And there are some Western countries like Canada and Australia that they have a growing homeschooling presence, but others ban homeschooling, like Germany, Sweden. It's illegal there. They don't allow it. So I think that's one big difference. We already talked. We talked about focus on sports. That's central. That's a real central part of our school culture here. It's very popular. Kids trying to get college scholarships. It's also pretty popular in Canada too, but pretty much everywhere else. The primary is through for sports is through club leagues. You do it outside of school. And we talked about the casual learning environment here. In other places, they're expected to be, maybe, I don't know if this is fair to say, but they're expected to be more respectful of their teachers. They exhibit a greater sense of discipline in foreign systems compared to the U.S. Where in theory, we're supposed to have more autonomy here, right? We're supposed to question and express our opinions. And there's some other differences too. In some countries, students will stay in one classroom, the teachers will move. The teachers will move to the different classrooms. And everyone's expected in foreign countries, or in most, they're expected to learn and pass the same subjects. Everyone has to go through, even up to calculus. You might have the dumbest person in the school with an 80 IQ in the same classroom. Someone who's got 140 IQ, and they're both studying calculus. So that's kind of how it is. Also, we talked about the property. We have, our system. We fund our schools through property taxes. Somewhat unique. because we have a very heavy reliance on property taxes. When we already said, most other countries, it's the national government that's funding most of the education, with maybe some from the regional or local governments. So the really spicy part comes in when we mentioned how the curriculum here in the U.S. it really disdains and looks down upon its majority population, its founding fathers, traditions and customs. All our renowned businessmen, especially if they're white, and then the replacement of their names from schools with non-white, less relevant people. I mean, we can go down a list from even Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, to Christopher Columbus, of course, General Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis. And also the ones around here, they were involved in so-called eugenics, and over 100 years ago. But of course, no one's going to take down Martin Luther King's Day, right? Even though he was a commie and he facilitated countless rapes of women and what else he did. You're not going to have people like Henry Ford and Charles Lindbergh, who were great Americans. They're America first.
Yeah.
But good luck trying to name a Stephen Street after them. And I mean, they're looked down upon for their so-called, anti-Semitic views. Henry Ford had to establish his own publishing company to spread his views on Jews because, even back then, the Jews controlled most of the media. And he would never have allowed Henry Ford to publish his observations on them over 100 years ago. Same with Charles Lindbergh. But FDR, the Jews, and intelligence agencies, they came after them and they shut that America First movement down. They even murdered Charles Lindbergh's 1-year-old child to send him a message. It almost kind of reminds you what happened to Thomas Massey's wife. I'm not sure that we ever got any resolution on that one. That was really unexpected. You know what I'm talking about, right? With Thomas Massey's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
I'm not sure we ever
suspicious.
found out.
No.
Yeah. It was. Another thing too, we talked about Henry Ford, the guy was a great business leader. There was a pretty famous corporate lawsuit that was brought by the Dodge brothers, and they were complaining that Henry Ford was not distributing dividends to the shareholders, and instead he wanted to grow his business, he wanted to keep the prices down of cars, and he wanted to hire more workers. So that was a pretty famous case about Henry Ford. Back it was 1920, and even a guy like Wrigley, for example, of Wrigley Field, Chicago Cubs, there was a pretty famous corporate case against him too in the 1960s because he didn't want to put up lights on the stadium, and his reason was that he was concerned about the neighborhood. That if we have night games, there's going to be more people who are drunk, more loitering, more crime. It's going to reduce property values in the area. And some of the shareholders sued him because they said, no, you have to think about the company. You have to think about what's in the best interest of the company, not the surrounding area. And so, these were really good businessmen too.
Yeah.
It wasn't just their political views. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, you're 100% right. I remember reading about that Dodge case, and if memory serves, Henry Ford was also anti-union. And he said, once you start controlling these workers and you get them to organize against a business, you will lose the business. Eventually, you will lose influence, and of course, the business owners will lose influence. And it's just a way to manipulate the individuals who work within.
Right. And when we've seen that, it's actually come true. So we've seen that. And then we mentioned about how here there's all the promotion of gender pronouns, homosexuality, transgenderism, multiculturalism, all of that stuff to very young students who are kindergarten, first grade. We had a recent Supreme Court decision, and we could talk about this later, basically on the parents to opt their children out of class when these LGBTQ books are read in class. And, they're supposed to receive advance notice and ability to pull their kids out of school that day, or at least for a time when the books are being read aloud in class. That was the case. We can come back to that. But that was the one, Mahmoud v. Taylor, out of Montgomery County, Maryland. And you had parents of Muslim, Orthodox, Catholic faiths who brought suit to stop what Montgomery County was doing. And they wanted notice. Montgomery County stopped providing notice to parents and an opportunity to opt out. And, Supreme Court said, no, school district, you can't do that. Parents have a First Amendment right, free exercise of religion, to direct the religious upbringing of their children. And you can't coerce the young students to sit through lectures and readings, that the families find offensive to their values. And it was very one-sided. Even the students, the very young students, we're talking like K through 5, they couldn't express negative opinions. The teachers were instructed by the school board to tell any kid who found transsexualism or homosexuals offensive, any kid who found that offensive, they were told that, hey, Johnny, you're being hurtful. Everything gaslighting the students. And so, so it was very one-sided. Very, you can only have one opinion on this stuff. You can't go against what the curriculum or what the school district views are on these topics. And so and we also talked about the unionized teachers, how they're very powerful here, how they really, pretty much almost all of their money to one political party and all these causes, and they contribute funds, and it's not just to the Democratic Party and groups whose mission is to get Democrats elected, but also to other groups that, you see that they're aligned with the Democratic Party, like Planned Parenthood, that push for abortions, other organizations that USAID has uncovered through DOGE, for so change and a Green New Deal. Of course, they oppose school choice and vouchers and those kinds of things. So they're very, very politically active. And another thing here, free public education for children of illegal aliens. In public schools in the U.S., they're obligated to provide access for all children, including those who are illegal, or as they like to say, undocumented. I mean, give me a break, It's also mostly the case in Europe, too, that illegals can attend for free. But you're not going to find that in the rest of the world, not really in Eastern Europe either, not in second, third world countries. But the West has to do that, right?
Yeah.
And then another difference, we have all these school shooting drills, school shootings and all that stuff, hoaxes. A lot of them are not real. Yeah, you've covered this extensively, in your podcast episodes, like Sandy Hook, Uvalde. What was that? It was a Tennessee private school not that long ago. Parkland, Columbine, were those hoaxes too?
It certainly seems like it. Parts of it, anyway. Yeah.
Parts of it, yeah. Yeah. And, I learned also a lot when, the other point that we brought up was about the Department of Education actions, funding, history, and illegality. And that's a lot from you, even like trafficking too, which I'm not surprised at all, but it wasn't something that really thought about. And then we talked about indoctrination. This is big, indoctrination of students with inaccurate history, misrepresentations of current political affairs. Like I brought up 9/11, JFK assassination, World War II, the Holocaust, climate change, and so-called COVID. We know there were no planes on 9/11 that hit the towers. I think that was CGI. Nothing in the Pentagon. Definitely not, or in Shanksville. This was an inside job. It was mainly Israelis. And they were able to get away. I think all the other flights were not allowed to leave, except the ones that were going to Israel that day. So they got away with it, and they blamed these patsies, these Arabs and Middle Easterns who were box cutters, who had 2 days of training with flight school with a turboprop, and all of a sudden they're able to fly a giant jet airplane and go through Manhattan traffic and hit their targets perfectly. And they had to, they overpowered these pilots and things that have never happened before. They're able to do that. Come on.
And what's interesting about that too is that even in current news events, there will be individuals who will find an opportunity to bring those stories back up and justify or basically repeat the mainstream narrative. I'll give you a quick example. There was a CIA agent, former CIA agent or analyst, I guess, who was a guest on Patrick Bet-David's show the other day. And I just saw a quick clip of it, and he was describing John Brennan. Well, of course, John Brennan's back in the news because allegedly there's a DOJ investigation into John Brennan. So this particular agent, he's telling Patrick Bet-David about how bad John Brennan is, which of course he's a complete asshole. But I mean, he's bringing up all these past stories about him and how he was a worthless CIA agent and he had the lowest level positions and whatever else. But then he says, again, kind of out of nowhere, he goes, John Brennan was one of the guys who helped bring in the 9/11 hijackers and decrease the security parameters around the 9/11 hijackers. And I'm going, wait a minute. I'm like, wait a minute. He was probably one of the individuals who helped script that entire story.
Yeah.
Not that he was, actually allowing these people to come in, but that he was using their identities to just script a story to sell to the American people.
Right.
It's amazing. But I mean, they find these little opportunities to just repeat something from the past to sort of re-traumatize or re-indoctrinate.
Yeah. Well, more people, though, or especially younger people, are waking up to all this stuff.
Yeah.
They're getting their information. They're finding it online, and they're not believing it. When we saw how the younger generations voted in the past election, right? Was it like Gen Z? More of them voted Republican?
I think so.
Democrat was the age 18 through 21.
Yep.
Especially the boys. So, things are changing. I used to think before the election, before 2021, I thought we need to raise the voting age up to at least 30. Only people that own property, only people certain. It's we shouldn't have people under 30 or 35 voting. So now I'm starting to think maybe we need to lower it. Maybe we need to bring it down to 16 or something. So anyway, as far as on the indoctrination, in JF. That's the whole single bullet theory nonsense. As Lee Harvey did it. That's not true. I mean, obviously that's not true. It's and this is pretty well documented now. And there was a really good article on UNS about how it was really that it was JFK was against Israel having the nuclear bomb and wanted AIPAC to register as a foreign agent. And so what did they do? They blew out his brains.
Yeah.
And I know stuff about World War II. World War II, that wasn't started by Germany. Hitler only, he only wanted the territories of Poland and Czechoslovakia that Germany was forced to surrender under that horrible Treaty of Versailles. Churchill, who was badly compromised, he was the prime instigator of the war, along with FDR. Whose that New Deal wasn't helping at all. It was just making things worse, and making our institutions worse. And they wanted war. And there's the British who started bombing Germany, and Germany didn't want to retaliate. Because Hitler thought they were like brothers. They're both of the same race, basically. And Hitler made several peace offers that Churchill was never elected. Churchill rejected all the peace offers. I mean, they were hell-bent on war. And then we get into the Holocaust, and that never happened. There was no final solution. And plus other groups like Catholics and there was another group too, the Gypsies or whatever, they suffered. They suffered even more, and they had far larger casualties. Maybe about 240,000 Jews died in those labor camps, but not from intentional killings, but from starvation and disease. As the Allies, they blocked the ports and supply routes, so food couldn't get in. And how many people know that more Germans died in the 5 years after the war than the number of Germans who were killed during the war? And who's still paying reparations to the Jews to this day? It's Germany. And then there's all the whole climate change nonsense that they push in the schools. It's really, again, it's all bogus. It's all meant to destroy our way of life. And I mean, there's no man-made warming. You can go back, and you're not going to find any correlation between greenhouse gases emitted and surface temperatures. It's all a fraud. Like COVID, there was no COVID. They never isolated so-called SARS-CoV-2 or any virus for that matter. An actual virus separated from other tissue. They've never been able to do that. No one died from COVID. There was no pandemic. There's never been a pandemic. It was all a lie. And now masking in public has been normalized. I guess the one benefit is at least who the mentally ill people are right off. So. And I still have to confront. I still confront maskers to this day. We have a lot of them around here. Some some of them have taken them off over time. I guess better late than never. But there are some who are going to wear those things for the rest of their lives, and almost all of them are jabbed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's sad watching it because again, I see the same thing, and I just think to myself again, they have no awareness. They're not looking around at the other people not wearing them, and they're not saying to themselves, "Well, wait a minute, maybe there's something that I don't have figured out." They actually just, they stick their feet in concrete and they say, "Nope, I'm the one who has it figured out. Everybody else is putting themselves at risk."
I bring this one of the first things I bring up. I'll even tell usually it's a worker. I'll say, look around. Notice your workers. You're like the only one who's wearing masks. Do you notice your workers are not wearing it and they're still coming back to work every day? They're not dropping dead. They're not getting sick every day.
Yeah.
Do you notice that? And I was just like, sometimes you just can't get through these people.
Yeah.
And they're young too. It's like, do your own research. Come on. These people, the people that were pushing the masking and all stuff, they weren't even going along with it themselves. What does that tell you? And just look at those people, the ones who were like, some of these county health directors and people in government. And come on, you're going to trust those people? So yeah, and then and the other difference is America very marks we have very racialized politics and all this sort of obnoxious cultural developments, very Marxist, like BLM, Black Lives Matter, the whole LGBTQ identity fanaticism. That's well established in American schools, universities. College campuses have been central to the whole BLM movement. Actively organizing and participating in protests and riots, and universities openly support Black Lives Matter. They'll issue statements, they'll create task forces, and they've really influenced universities to develop their DEI, their diversity training for staff, and all kinds of like scholarship programs. It still remains relevant on campuses. I think so. I don't think a whole lot has changed. There's students who still continue to organize and engage, although I think it's somewhat receding a bit. But, there's still all these racial justice issues that are tied with BLM, and same with LGBTQ policies. A lot of colleges have implemented policies that for sexual orientation and gender identity, and all these non-discrimination clauses and gender-neutral housing and restrooms. I was at Stanford helping out a family friend, daughter from out of state, and helping her move in. And I asked where the bathroom was. This was just this past school year. And I asked where the bathroom was. And she pointed the bathroom to me. I went in there and whoa, wait a second. This is not the men's room. There was nobody in there, luckily. I was like, I walked back. I said, whoa, where's the men's room? She's like, oh, no, these are all gender neutral restrooms. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Wow.
And I asked her, I said, how do you feel about that? She first hesitated to give me, I said, please speak honestly with me. How do you feel? Well, I'm not comfortable with it. And it's kind of gross, especially being next to a guy in the bathroom. I was like, well, obviously it is, and I said, why did you choose this place? Then all of them are like this, right? No, they're not. I said, why? Well, because I could get my own room here. I didn't want to share a room with someone else. I didn't want to have a roommate. So that's why I saw this was the only place left that I could get a single room. So I was like, oh boy. Wow. Imagine you can take showers, co-ed showers, bathrooms. Come on. And you've talked a lot about also the influence of teacher education programs on the failure of K through 12 and higher education school. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add to that.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's a particular article here that I wanted to just hit some of the highlights because, in my opinion, this is a perfect example of what happens when people are distracted, people are busy, and they can't read between the lines. And then, of course, government rolls out a bill and laws like this, specifically in the state of Florida here. And a lot of people end up getting tricked, and they have no idea that, in fact, the public school system is getting worse. But they're also showing themselves, along with government, that there's no remorse for their past actions, specifically regarding the whole COVID lie. And just the implementation of these laws. This was from and I know you have ties to Florida, but this was Orlando Weekly, and this was titled Gulf of America High School Phone Ban and More Florida Education Laws Now in Effect. It said several education bills were delayed until the last day of session and jammed into two major packages. This was on July 2nd. So the American public's distracted with Independence Day. They're paying attention to all of that, in particular, of course, in the state of Florida, and they have no idea that this just got rammed through in the state of Florida. And again, a lot of people are like, well, it's the free state of Florida. They're the most conservative, whatever else. It's like, wait a minute. They're actually pushing laws here and implementing laws now that are showing everybody that they've learned nothing from the COVID lie. So the first portion of this, Senate Bill 1070, is to increase electrocardiograms for student athletes. It requires that schools have them and that students have them. Now, why is that?
Electrocardiograms for 16, 17, 18-year-olds.
Exactly. And it gets worse here. CPR, that everybody has to be trained in CPR. In particular, again, if you're within the grades of 9 and 11. Yeah. Same thing with anaphylaxis, that you have to be able to appropriately respond to anaphylactic shock. Again, why would that be the case? Is it because everybody's jabbed?
Yeah.
School safety also, school sports, school start times, employee reporting when it comes to, again, employees being arrested, misdemeanor charges that they have to basically report to the school that they've been arrested. And then, of course, they slide in Holocaust remembrance. It says Senate Bill 356 requires the governor to declare January 27th of each year as Holocaust Remembrance Day. Schools may observe the day by teaching students about the effects of the Holocaust and positive contributions by the Jewish community. I mean, honestly.
Not the millions and millions that have died from Nazism, right? None of that. Not the Holodomor, not all the things that happened to the German people. None of that, right?
Exactly.
It has to be this Holocaust.
Yep. Yeah. And then, of course, as I've mentioned before, the business of, I believe there are 6 counties in Florida that are test piloting removing cell phones all day long. Which again is, that's basically 6 counties. So that's going to be interesting too, because the reason that they're getting rid of cell phones is because of the availability of truth on cell phones as opposed to what they're being taught in school.
You kind of have like a little different perspective on that, right? It seems like you're kind of, you understand that it can be distracting, but you also find it that it can be also really useful. Especially for students that are looking for the truth.
Yeah, I remember when the iPhones first came out. I mean, I was still teaching at that time, and there were students just flat out addicted to it. They would put it in their back pockets. They would sit on it all day long. And there were girls who would get carpal tunnel syndrome because they're texting all day.
Yeah.
And they'd say, and I'd say, why are both of your wrists in carpal tunnel braces? And they'd say, well, I have carpal tunnel syndrome. And they're still they're still texting with their thumbs moving at 10 miles an hour. And I'm saying to myself, do you think that's the problem? Maybe you should put the phone down for a while.
Yeah.
But again, but of course, it's also schools, as I brought up on the show, it's also schools that don't want illegality to be caught by students on their phones and then uploaded to the media.
Right.
I mean, that's, they're burying crimes then. So it's dicey.
Yeah. And then I guess the last points that we made were about the dynamics of school boards and Robert's Rules of Order. This is all your area, voting, state legislation proposals. And again, I want to repeat that these are all things you talk about on your show.
Yeah.
All these things. And I guess the last thing that we mentioned was just the influence of the regional and global medical industry, especially in the area of vaccines. The whole vaccine schedule that they push, childhood vaccine schedules, their whole COVID policies, pushing the toxic jabs. That's all up your way. That's in your wheelhouse, man. That's all that you've exposed all that. Yours is the only show that I know you focus on a lot of different things, but really on education and all the real problems in America in a way that others would not be familiar with, because they don't have like your background as a teacher in the system and as an administrator. They don't have that. Yeah. So you're able to talk about things in a way that you can't find. I can't find on any other show. And then, of course, you hit all the other topics too. But that's a big part. That's a big part of your podcast series and your websites and your Substack articles.
Yeah, it's certainly the meat of it. That's certainly the goal, is to basically pinpoint the frequency of America and education and what's going on. No doubt.
Yeah. So, and just kind of wrap up this whole with the whole trademark thing. There was a case that I tried to compare your application to. There was a trademark called the Great American Bash, and in that case, the board I believe it was a board at the USPTO held that the mark, the Great American Bash, it was not primarily geographically descriptive of wrestling exhibitions, because the wording Great American, that suggests something of like desirable quality or excellence, and Bash, that was also in there too. Maybe that's suggestive of services, but just like yours, American education, that suggests something of unique qualities about the education system in the United States that we're known for, rather than being a geographic source of your services. And so it kind of reminds me also, there's like the term All American. There is actually a trademark for handkerchiefs. That's the trademark is All American, and we know what that means. That there's significance to that in the realm of sports. To basically to just about every American, they know that. Like to every high school boy, that the term indicates some kind of superiority or some distinction in the athletic world. So it's there's a different meaning. It has a different significance than just a geographic location, and that's what we're trying to argue with your mark. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah. I'm willing to go as far. And of course, we have the you're coming up on 5 years of continuous use, so we always have that we could fall back on. I want to see how far this goes, and and whatever. This is fun.
I appreciate your work on it.
This has become really fun. Again, I never thought it would turn into.
Yeah,
I thought it would be making just standard trademark arguments, distinguishing. Oh no! This is a real opportunity to express our views.
And of course, you've also found out, and you probably already knew this, but that some of these lawyers on the other end who are responsible for accepting or declining, I mean, they're politically motivated too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Right about that. Yeah. Well, do you want to move on to?
Hey, I'll tell you what. Let's get into New California. What do you say?
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, let's do that. And we can come back to some of the Supreme Court stuff if you want. So, I don't know how many people have heard of the New California State movement or initiative that's going on here in California. So there was a group of people. They basically want to break off from California and become New California. More like the rural areas that are like closer, away from the ocean, away from the coast, but more closer, all the inland and rural areas along, closer to like Nevada and Arizona. And basically, these are people, they're citizens that, they've had enough with the tyranny and the corruption of the failed California government. They feel disenfranchised and they're neglected. And, this sort of also the idea California is too large and ungovernable. And, just really, there's too much of a difference between people that live outside of the coastal areas and the people that live in the coastal parts. So they want to basically split off. And the model that they're following is the West Virginia model. So it's like intrastate secession. They're not trying to secede from the United States. They're just trying to secede from California. And with West Virginia, they became a state. Basically, they were part of Virginia, and they became a state during the Civil War. When the western counties of Virginia, and I think they were opposed to secession from the Union, they formed their own state government, and they were admitted to the Union as West Virginia in 1863. And so that's kind of the model. And also, you look at like Article 4, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. That it states that ways that a new state can be admitted by Congress into the Union. So it says like no new state shall be formed within the jurisdiction of any other state without the consent of the legislatures of the states, as well as Congress. Now, I think they think there's another way to do it, possibly, maybe with the Insurrection Act, maybe through like an executive order. I'm not sure about that. That part is not really clear to me. I haven't been involved, really. I'll tell you my involvement. So what happened was, so this has been going on since like maybe 2018. These people have been, they have like their own new California state representatives and senators and all that, and formed the Constitution. I was invited to attend a new California state constitutional convention. I found out later that this has probably been like their 13th constitutional convention, 12th or 13th, something like that. Wow. And but finally to finally like ratify their new constitution. And I also got invited because someone, new state senators, they nominated me for a position on their constitutional Supreme Court as a Supreme Court justice. So I was like, wow, I'm flattered by that. So I have to attend now. So I went to this thing. I looked at their draft constitution and things that I didn't really like. I just felt like they took the California Constitution and made some changes, and it was kind of got bogged down a lot in the beginning. It wasn't really inspiring. There were some things that I wanted to change about that, but let me just kind of step back. And so the person who nominated me, and I got to meet some of the leaders too. These are good people. These are the ones that are involved. I'm not going to say a lot about the ones who are like the president and vice president, all that. The people here, they are patriots. These people that are involved, they do want to break off from California. They don't necessarily want to move away from there if they're living on the coastal areas, but they are in favor of breaking away from California and forming a new state. And the thing is, so there was about maybe 40 or 50 people, maybe about 50 people there, 50 or 60. Most of them were like boomers or older Gen X. I didn't see anyone in the room who was under 30. I'm not saying that you can't have a movement with all older people, but something about it seemed to me like, are these people really? Are these the ones who are going to lead this change? And then the head of the group, the president, his last name's Preston, seemed like a nice guy. I met him. He's pretty jovial. He says all the right things. He speaks well. And then they have like this older guy who's like their attorney general. He's practiced for like 50 years. I don't think he even lives in California. I think he lives in Nevada.
Robert Thomas.
Yeah. He's very knowledgeable. He has a lot of like, prosecution and defense, criminal defense experience. Seems to know the Constitution very well. A lot of these people, if I had to say, I don't want to call them like conservatives or your traditional boomer conservatives, but you can kind of say that. You get a lot of the Israel First, Judeo Christian types who are there. Yeah. And I don't know where this is going. And it seems like there's less news about it. They keep having these conventions, and you have to pay. You just can't attend. Even I was invited, and I had to pay.
Yeah.
And didn't get a whole lot to eat, but had to pay. and so they have these things, and people attend. You get kind of excited though. I was my first time, and I was like, oh, it's all right. Maybe it's going to go somewhere. Maybe one day I'm going to wake up and there's going to be like 3-4 new states. Like there's going to be New California, a new New York, a new Illinois, or something. Or then. I kind of looked into this a little bit more, and like, I don't know. I don't know where this is going, to be honest. I really like the idea. Maybe it's about time. And I know that there's a lot of other areas like, Eastern Oregon that they'd like to be part of Idaho, maybe even Eastern Washington as well. Very different than Western Washington. I lived in Eastern Washington. So lots happening. There's been a lot of changes. Oh, mostly very good, right? The last 7 months, it almost feels like a new country in many ways. I don't know if you would agree with that, but it seems like a lot of really good things have happened, since January of this year. And I think could we have like some new states now that break off from their, very heavily blue dominated politics? I don't know, and so I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
I just saw the other day regarding California that apparently they just got 2-some-odd million individuals off of their voter rolls who shouldn't have even been on the voter rolls. So, okay. I mean, that's progress, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. You know what? Maybe if they just got rid of all those illegal voters, it might actually be a red state.
No kidding. Yeah.
Might. Maybe Donald Trump actually won California. Who knows?
I think he may have the first time around, if not the second time around. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the third time.
That too.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. But I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I have not been intimately involved. I've only attended one of their conventions. It was like their big constitutional convention where they were going to finalize things. But now then they had another one. So that's like, I understand these things. Maybe they take time, but I don't really know where this is going.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it can't happen. I just don't know that these are the right people to do it.
And it was it was 2 weeks ago, wasn't it?
No, well, so the most recent one?
Yeah.
Yeah, the recent one was like 2 weeks ago. Gotcha. The one I attended was almost 2 months ago.
Okay.
And I was just there to really to express my views on our Constitution. I wanted to see put the individual rights up front, make it shorter. I wanted them to lower the age to conceal carry. The constitutional carry should be everywhere. And they also had like the governor at 25. Come on now, governor's got to be older than 25. Should be at least 35. And I thought the terms were too short. And and we talked a little bit about this too. The militias should operate free from control of the government. I didn't like the part about they had a really big section in there about education, about government schools, public schools. I don't want that. I don't think there should be any public or government schools.
Right.
Homeschooling is the way. You could have and you brought up a good point though. Maybe that there could be an exception for the disabled or people that are not as able-minded, but they should pay for it. And maybe for a number of years, maybe only for a set number of years,
or just be taxed. Yeah.
But it should be encouraged that the family creates the education of their children. And I didn't like property taxes. Oh man! And so they have a thing in there for property taxes. I think that's awful. You really never feel like you own your home free and clear.
Yeah.
If you don't pay your property taxes, the state can foreclose. They can foreclose on your home. Maybe I'd be okay with a very low sales tax, preferably 1%. That might be all that's required. I didn't want any communists or socialists in there. They had the part about communists, but they also said no national socialists. So I took out the word national. I said remove that. Remove national before socialist. Because National Socialists believed in God. They believed in strong families. They believed in free enterprise. They believed in gun rights. They didn't force vaccines on their people, which is the antithesis of what the socialists and communists believe. And I didn't want there, and also, I wanted some provisions in there that under no circumstances should any politician or anyone be coerced into signing or pledge to sign a document supporting a foreign country. And we know that a lot of states have that. And if you want to do business with a state or be a contractor, you have to pledge that you're not going to oppose Israel, or that you're going to support Israel.
Yeah.
Or that you're not going to boycott them. You're not going to be involved in specifically one country. And I also wanted language in there about keeping those who have dual citizenship from running for office. We have a lot of dual citizens in Congress and in past and current administrations who are loyal to a foreign country, Israel. And also I want to see the protection for the rights of the unborn, that the sanctity that we're going to recognize and support the sanctity of unborn life and the rights of unborn children and rights to life. And we're going to ensure the protection of the rights of the unborn child in all manners and measures appropriate and lawful. So I wanted that language in there. That should be unlawful for anyone to perform or attempt to perform an abortion at any stage of the pregnancy. So anyway, after Roe v. Wade got overruled, states can now basically set their own rules on abortion, and they can ban it. So it's left to the states now. So I want to see that in there as well.
Sure. Yeah, it was an interesting document reading it. Again, I'll never forget you sending it to me, and you were like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I mean, it was a cool document. But you're right. There were some things that needed to change, no doubt. Yeah.
But so anyway, I don't know where this is going to go. It's hard to say.
I know that Paul Preston is on Dr. Dave Janda's radio show on Sundays from time to time, and I think he was on this past Sunday, and I don't think he mentioned it at all. I mean, he doesn't bring it up every time he's on the radio talking with God knows who, but it's
he doesn't bring up New California?
I mean, he has in the past, but he didn't this past time, and there have been times when he's been on where he never brings it up.
Well, what's he talking about then?
Exactly. I mean, he kind of brings up other political issues, or he'll talk about geoengineering or whatever else, but
yeah.
A little bit of Gavin Newsom, things like that, but yeah.
Okay. So even the president, the guy who's sort of the face of this, isn't even bringing this up. He has the opportunity to do so on these radio shows.
Right.
He's not always bringing it up.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well.
But it is interesting, and this is one of those sort of gauging the political climate things. It's very interesting that we're seeing more and more politicians and even these talking heads in Con Inc. bring up the stuff about Israel and not giving Israel money and making sure, again, that, we don't, or basically that we force their government and their lobbies to register as foreign agents and dual citizenship and all of this. I mean, we've been screaming this for a long time, and a lot of people have been screaming it longer than I have, and we're making some progress here, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I think even Marjorie Taylor Greene brought it up.
Exactly. Yeah, she's come around.
So, she's coming around.
Yeah.
I always felt Thomas Massey was basically the only one who was America first. He was the only one who wasn't a traitor.
Yeah.
In Congress, but maybe that's not the case anymore.
I don't know where to put him, to be honest. I mean, he's said and done a great deal of things which are absolutely fantastic, and he's advocating for small government, which is also great. Yeah. I came across an article before Independence Day where it basically said that Donald Trump was going to put up a primary candidate in place of Massey to run against Massey, and this guy is based out of Kentucky apparently, but he's pro-Israel to the bone. I mean, it's just what do you think is going on there? I don't know. I've read some things having to do with Massey having connections to child trafficking and drug running in Kentucky. That there's some things he's blackmailed with, or he's turned a blind eye on particular things. But I don't know if any of that's true.
It doesn't seem like it, though, right?
I know.
He has a great background. the guy's like a beast, basically. He's built his own house without using any nails. It's just with all the resources on his land.
Yeah.
He started a company. Then he sold it, and he decided, like, you know what? I just want to go back home now and raise my family, and have kids with my wife. Then he got involved in local politics just because of like the some tax things that were going on that he was opposed to, and one thing led to another, and he ended up in Congress. Yeah. AIPAC has gone against him, has opposed him for at least like three of his primaries or three of his elections, and Massey's won Massey has won easily. At least like 75% of the vote. I mean, I really like the guy a lot.
Yeah,
it seems like yeah. So I don't know what the deal is. Maybe because he's not supporting the bill or what. I don't know. But
he lives in an RV. Apparently, he lives in an RV in Washington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's got his own mobile home, and he doesn't waste money in Washington if he doesn't have to. And I mean, he's a bright dude, no doubt about it.
And he's come back even stronger. It seems like I thought, with the death of his wife, I don't know how he's gonna recover from that. But it's like he's back. He's in no time he came right back and was just doing his thing. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I hope the best for him. I mean, I'd like him to stick around if he's not dirty. But yeah. I've
not heard anything dirty about him, but I'm basically living on the other side of the country from him too. So I don't, just from some things I've read, just that this guy seems like the all-American guy.
Yeah.
This is how you want to be.
He certainly didn't have to do it. And I mean, that seems to be one of the other, one of the hooks too, which is good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you want to transition from here, or what do you think?
Yeah, get into the Supreme Court stuff. If you've got any news there, go for it.
Well, so there was the big case, Trump v. Casa. We thought it was going to be the birthright citizenship case. It didn't turn out to be a birthright citizenship case. That was the one on nationwide injunctions. Basically, the court said, look, if you bring a lawsuit and you want you want an order that declares a law to be invalid or something, it's only going to apply to you. That's what the Supreme Court said. It's not going to apply to everyone in the country. All right. So if I go before a district court and I want the district court to order that this executive order is unconstitutional or is invalid somehow, or doesn't apply to me, it's only going to apply to the parties that are before the court. It's not going to apply to other districts or other circuits. And that's how it should be. That's how it's supposed to be. That's all they have authority to do. You can't go into court and say that, oh, this my lawsuit also is going to affect everyone else in the country. You can't do that. That the courts don't have that power. Now you can bring it up to the next level. Now, if you have we're here in the Ninth Circuit, you are in the I believe the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, where Ohio is. Now you have case precedent. You'll have precedent that if it gets up to the Sixth Circuit, then it'll only apply though to that ruling will only apply to Ohio, Michigan, Tennessee, and I think Kentucky's in your. Is it Kentucky?
It could be.
Yeah. It could be, yeah. And then from there, if it gets to the Supreme Court, well, then the Supreme Court can then that'll apply that ruling or that precedent apply to the rest of the country. But one district court in one part of one state can't just issue an order that binds everybody in the country, and that's what that district court tried to do. When these, I can't remember, it was a group and a pregnant woman or whatever that wanted to, that went into court and they wanted a ruling that would apply to the whole country. And then, no, you can't do that. That's not how our system works. We don't grant those nationwide or universal injunctions. That's not how it is. It's just only to you guys, only to the parties that are before the court, you plaintiffs. So we didn't get a ruling on birthright citizenship. Maybe that's going to come. That might come later this year. That was Trump's executive order, and I agree with it. Yeah. He said that he said that basically citizenship rights it should be denied to children whose mother was here unlawfully. If they're unlawfully present in the United States, or they're lawful but temporary, you don't get to be a citizen just because you're born here. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, there were like attorneys and other commentators who think, "Oh no, if you're born here, it doesn't matter. You're a U.S. citizen." And they try to cite like this one case from like the late 1800s. It's called Wong Kim Ark, and the thing about that case is that what they never mention is that the child of the Wong Kim Ark family, that the child not just was born in the United States, but his parents were actually permanent aliens. They just couldn't be citizens because of the Chinese exclusion statutes, but they were permanent aliens, lawful, not illegal or not unlawful. And so they never bring that up. And the 14th Amendment is pretty clear about this too. I think there is a distinction between where it says in the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment in Section 1 that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That means like basically you're exclusively loyal to the United States, not to a foreign state. So there, and in other parts of the 14th Amendment, it distinguishes between citizens and persons. So there's the language I just read about subject to the jurisdiction thereof, about citizens. And then later in the Due Process Clause and Equal Protection Clause, it talks about within its jurisdiction that people, if that persons have due process and equal protection rights. That just means like if you're here in this country and you're not a citizen, you still have to obey the traffic laws. And if you're criminally prosecuted, you're going to still receive due process of law as any other person in the U.S. But you're not going to be a citizen if you're here and you have a child and you're here temporarily. And even like the Civil Rights Act around the same time in 1866, it even said very clearly that all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, and excluding Indians not taxed. So, I mean, it's right there. It even distinguishes that, that there's foreigners and Indians not taxed. They cannot become citizens. Now, the thing with Indians changed later. That was like in the 1920s. There was another statute that allowed Indians to become citizens. But I think it was pretty clear. I mean, it doesn't make sense even. That why is it that someone that it's people who are legal and illegal or who commit legal and illegal conduct. Why would you treat them identically? It's like a person who kills. It's like if you kill without any reason, without any excuse, you're a murderer. But if you do it in self-defense, you're not guilty. You didn't commit murder, and we understand that distinction. Why should it be different? In this context as well. If you're here illegally versus somebody who is here, comes in here and goes through the process and becomes a permanent resident, there should be a distinction. I don't see how the Supreme Court, once they get to this, how they can rule any other way. I'm sure the liberals will, though, but we'll see. I'm not always sure how, like Justice Barrett, Roberts, Gavin, I'm not sure about some of these. They're considered conservatives, but they're not like Alito. They're not like Thomas. I think Alito's the best. I think Thomas is probably second. And then Gorsuch. Gorsuch can be very libertarian. Sometimes he can do some weird things. There was that Bostock case in 2020 where he held it was under the Civil Rights Act, Title VII, that transgender people and homosexuals are also protected under the word sex. So that, the word sex also applies to them and they're protected under Title VII. So if you fire someone, you discriminate against someone, let's say who's transgender, then they could bring a lawsuit. But that's different from saying that transgender people and homosexuals are protected under the 14th Amendment. That's a little bit different. There's a constitutional, or they have constitutional protections under the Equal Protection Clause. So, anyway, we'll see how this whole thing comes out with birthright citizenship. There were some really good cases. I think this was probably one of the best Supreme Court's terms that that we've had in maybe 100 years. There was a I don't know if you heard about the transgender therapy case out of Tennessee.
No, go for it.
Well, the Tennessee legislatures I think it was in 2022, they passed a law that made it illegal to basically to administer any kind of like what they call gender affirming care. It's basically illegal to allow a minor to be treated with like hormone therapy, with what are they called? Puberty blockers. Sure. and surgery. Made illegal. Even if the parents want it, they can't. You can't do it to minors. You can't treat a minor basically for like, because I'm confused about my sex and I think I'm really supposed to be the other sex. So the bill basically said that you can't perform any kind of medical procedures to enable a minor if they want to change their identity. You can't do that. Basically, said no. We're not going to allow that. And there's a lot of other states too that are doing this, that are not allowing anyone under the age of 18 to go through any kind of like surgery or any kind of like drug, to use any kind of drugs to try to change their. Yeah, I mean, you can't do it, but basically, like, I want my, even though I'm Johnny, I'm a boy, I was born as a boy, that I really feel more like Janie now, and I want to, I want to like try to transition. And you can't do that. So there's a lot of states that have. So anyway, this one was challenged. There were like these their parents of these transgender minors and a physician. They filed suit. They wanted to challenge the constitutionality of it's called SB1. It was a law in Tennessee. And they contended that SB1 violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment and was therefore unconstitutional. And actually, the district judge sided with the plaintiffs that they could secede, that it could succeed. Sorry about that, on their challenge. That the prohibition of these puberty blockers and hormones that was unconstitutional. But then it got reversed on appeal to the Sixth Circuit, and the Supreme Court basically followed what the Sixth Circuit's Court of Appeals said. That's in your area. It found that the Sixth Circuit said no, that we're only going to apply the lowest level of scrutiny to this, and that this law does not classify on the basis of sex, because the law applies equally to all minors, regardless of sex. And they said that being transgender that's not a kind of like a suspect class that we have to protect. So they said no, that SB1 is constitutional, and the Supreme Court agreed with that reasoning. It was your typical 6-3 case on some of these hot button issues. You had like the Republican appointed justices on one side, and then the 3 Democrat appointed on the other side, and they agreed that this Tennessee law is constitutional. That they basically rejected the arguments that were brought by the parents who wanted to subject their kids to these medical treatments. So I guess it's very positive, that and there's a lot of other states that are doing this. So I think it's a really good thing. I think they're clearly correct. That doesn't, and they even got a little bit into the science as well. That these are not safe. These procedures are not safe, and they do lead to a lot of problems, not just physically, but also emotionally, psychologically. And I don't think they went into this, but there's also a lot of them who are trying to like what do you call like detransition.
Oh yeah,
who are not, and they didn't really have a choice. I doubt these kids like came up with this on their own. It was pushed on them in the schools, or their parents. It's really, you got to wonder about the sanity of these parents that do this. I mean, obviously, many kids, sure, they go through some problems when they're going through puberty, but then, things will be fine. They'll get through it. Just don't jump in and say, oh, okay, well, let's cut off your breast now, or let's do this and that, and get you on drugs. And so anyway, I thought that was a very welcome opinion by the Supreme Court. That they did the right thing. they said, but on the other hand, if states want to do this, if they want to allow parents to, quote unquote, transition, they can do that too. But if there's a law that is going to ban that, it's going to be upheld by the courts. So that was a good one. There was also the one I told you about with the LGBTQ books that were in the public schools.
Yeah.
That was called Malmort v. Taylor.
Yeah.
And again, that's another one of these 6-3 rulings. We talked about it was in Maryland, Montgomery County, that they used to provide notice and an opportunity for parents to pull their kids out of school if there was going to be any allowed reading on some of these topics, on these LGBTQ themed storybooks. Again, it was one of those where the lower courts said, well, no, parents don't have any kind of constitutional right for this. This is fine. They don't have to give notice. Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. And, you got to, some of these books, there was one, it was about a dog at a gay pride parade. There was another one, it's called Uncle Bobby's Wedding, about a girl who attends her gay uncle's gay wedding. And, parents were offended by this because it goes against the teaching of their own, their religious beliefs. Now, of course, the answer would be, why are there public schools? Why don't they homeschool? That would be the real way, the best way to respond to these issues. But the Supreme Court held, though, that it's long recognized the rights of parents to direct their religious upbringing, the religious upbringing of their children. And when those rights are violated by government policies that interfere with the religious development, that's a violation of the First Amendment that these parents have. That we guarantee religious freedom. And so the Supreme Court said that no, you have to give these parents notice and an opportunity to opt out of these of class. When these books are being read. The problem, though, is and they never got into this, and this is something that you would know, okay, so basically this case was pretty much limited to when a teacher reads aloud, okay? Mm-hmm. But that in a classroom there's libraries, and not just there's libraries inside the classroom, and then there's the main library as well. And who knows what books are on those shelves? And there's other ways of that these kids, that they have workshops. They might get in small groups. They might read together. They might have little mini assignments where they self-select the books from the classroom library. They might have little mini lessons on reading skills. I don't know how I don't know that this ruling affects any of that. Right. They could still put all these books up in their libraries, and even in the classroom library, and even in other kinds of things. So I don't know how, you could say that this is good, but really, how far does it go? Yeah, how knowledgeable are they?
It doesn't go far enough. I do remember some of that testimony, and it was one of the lawyers, of course, defending these kinds of books within schools, and they were explaining this to Neil Gorsuch. And it was a rather interesting exchange because he's saying, okay, I'm examining this book. I've read the book. I've seen the pictures inside and the drawings inside. And they were getting so detailed on some of the drawings that Neil Gorsuch was saying, okay, there's clearly a parade going on. And then the lawyer defending these books would say, well, it's not a pride parade, but it's just a parade. And Neil's going, well, wait a minute. It looks like a pride parade. It's got the rainbow flags and everybody's dressed up differently. And then he honed in on one particular cartoon character and said, so you're saying that this person is wearing a black leather jacket? And the lawyer was like, well, yes, that's exactly what it is. It's just a leather jacket. And they're going, but is it? And as it turns out, it was a giant bondage suit. I mean, it was a head-to-toe bondage suit with a mask and a whip and the whole thing. And it's like, this is how far we've fallen. I mean, this is where our focus is. But you're right. When it comes to the business of instruction, school libraries are run by the library associations and the National Library Association, and these people are about as gay as you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
and the book fairs and all of that stuff. So yeah, when it comes to exposure, they're still exposed to it all the time. It's just whether or not it's in the curriculum and whether or not it's going to be read out loud. And then, of course, now they have to at least tell the parents that this is the book that's going to be read. And if you want to opt out, then you can opt out. But, in this day and age, if you're sending your children to a school like that, chances are you know exactly what instruction they're going to receive and they're for it.
Right. Right. In other areas too, and not just English. But yeah, and in the classroom libraries too, those are filled with dozens of books, maybe hundreds.
Yeah.
On the shelves in the classroom. And they're sorted by like maybe reading levels or genres or themes. So, what do you do about that?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? So, yeah. And another thing is this was K through 5. I'm not sure how they would have felt about if it was high school kids. I guess they would have thought maybe, high school kids can ignore it better. They could, they could resist it. But I don't know. Maybe it would have came out differently if these were older students.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And then, there was, and the other case that was kind of interesting is kind of, again, kind of similar themes. There was the age verification for online pornography case out of Texas. It was Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton. Okay. So that was the Supreme Court upheld the Texas law requiring age verification for accessing these pornographic websites. Now, when you think Free Speech Coalition, you might think like, okay, people, they're free speech advocates, people that, they don't want government interference. No, this is a adult film trade group. Okay, so this is basically like a pornographic trade group. Okay. Just to want the name to throw you off there a little bit, but so the Supreme Court, they upheld Texas's law that requires any pornographic websites that have at least 1/3 of their content that you can say that it's pornography, that they have to verify the user's age before granting access. And there's also similar laws in at least 20 other states that are doing this. And, I don't think you need this. Here's the other thing. See, this is another, I don't know, really, it may help on a margin. It may reduce the ability of children to access these sites on a margin, and even adults. I think that was one of the arguments on the other side, is that you're not just restricting it to children, you're actually making it harder for adults to access these sites. Well, good. The problem is, though, and I agree with the whole thing here. The problem is, though, that a lot of these sites are foreign. A lot of these porn sites are foreign and based in foreign countries. This is not going to apply to them. They're not going to abide by this, and you're not going to be able to get your hands on them to do anything about it. And the ID requirement, it's not. It doesn't have to be a picture ID, like a driver's license or something. I think if you just show a credit card, any kind of even a transactional document they talk about. So, it sounds good what they're doing here, but at the effect overall, I'm sure they're still going to find ways to easily get around it. And so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. You talk about the Jewish lobby. They run those websites. They own those companies.
Well, Pornhub is owned by a Jewish rabbi.
There you go.
If you knew that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I was actually a little surprised that this came out this way, because there are cases, from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that struck these laws down. Because it said the court held that before, 20, 30 years ago, they held that, well, you're limiting access to adults. Now, adults have a right to view this stuff, even if children do not. But things have changed in the last 25 years. I think they realize that this is far more widespread now. Online pornography, you got smartphones now, easily accessible from the palm of your hands. And, maybe other things have not worked. I remember 25, 30 years ago, the argument was, parents could just install filters. They can just put filters. Oh, okay. The kids know how to get around that. I don't think that's the answer. And the Supreme Court, the majority said, look, age verification requirements, there's not a problem because we do it in many other areas. If you want to buy alcohol or cigarettes or a gun or get a driver's license or buy a lottery ticket, you have to verify your age. You're supposed to do for voting too, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I guess so that was another justification the court used to uphold these age verification requirements. Available technology, like I said, like filtering, blocking. You get to say maybe that's less restricted, but those really don't work. And that's pretty much it. As far as like the Supreme Court cases that I thought were worthy, there was the one against Smith and Wesson. You heard about when the Mexican government tried to sue all these gun manufacturers for crimes that were for these cartel related violence. The Mexico government sued the gun manufacturers.
I'm vaguely familiar, but explain that.
Yeah, so that was so the Mexican government wanted to sue. They sued in court all of these gun manufacturers. That they said, we don't really have one gun store in Mexico, and all these guns that the cartels are using are coming from U.S. manufacturers, and they're blaming. And the Mexican government was blaming all these firearm manufacturers for the crimes and torts that were committed by other people, like third parties. It's not the gun manufacturers that are committing these crimes or that are working with the cartels. But they said, oh no, it's foreseeable that this was going to happen. You knew this. You knew that some of these guns would end up in the hands of these cartels, and it was foreseeable. Well, there's a law on the books. It was from like the 1980s, because that's when a lot of these lawsuits were first springing up against gunmen. You're trying to like sue gun manufacturers for like crimes that are committed by other people. And just like they did with the cigarette companies, they did that, and they won on those cases. But so there was a law that was in the U.S. that says that you can't sue gun manufacturers for crimes that are committed by other people, with one very narrow exception: if they're aiding and abetting. So that was their argument. They said, companies like Smith and Wesson and these other manufacturers, they're aiding and abetting third-party misuse of guns in Mexico. They're supplying guns to dealers who sell these guns to traffickers, and they're not imposing additional controls on their distribution networks, and they're designing their guns to really appeal to these cartels. They call these military style assault weapons. It's AR-15s. Come on, everyone has those. So they alleged all these these horrible transactions by these gun manufacturers, and the lower courts actually sided with Mexico. Even if it was the First Circuit Court of Appeals up in the Northeast, like Maine, New Hampshire, those states, sided with Mexico 3-0. That you can't bring this suit. The manufacturers can't be held liable. They are a proximate cause of these crimes. Supreme Court unanimously 9-0 reversed the lower court on this and said no. That the gun manufacturers are not responsible. They don't intend this. That they don't want this to happen. Even if they're indifferent, even if they don't care, that's still not illegal for the gun manufacturers. They didn't do anything wrong here. Show us. Well, what did they do wrong? They're like so far up in the chain. As far as like the distribution network, you have like the manufacturers, and you have like distributors, and you got down dealers, and you got the purchasers, and then maybe the purchasers are, or straw purchasers or whatever. So they're so far away. And why would they do this? Where's the evidence that they're aiding and abetting these crimes? And Justice Kagan, who's a liberal, who was appointed by Obama, I believe, she's the one that wrote the opinion and said, no, you don't have a case. This has to be reversed. We're reversing this. No, you're out of luck. You can't just come out here and sue and blame the gun manufacturers for crimes that are committed by other people. So that's a really good development.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think of how liberal that First Circuit Court of Appeals has to be.
Oh yeah,
that they actually went 3-0 the other way.
Yeah,
even Justice Ketanji Jackson, Sotomayor, and Kagan disagreed with the First Circuit. I actually looked up the First Circuit just to see who was on there. Trump, I think that's the only circuit where he did not make one appointment.
Wow.
in his first term. There's like only 5 or 6 active judges on that First Circuit. They're all Democrats. And then of the senior judges who are like, semi-retired, but they're still, they're still like sitting in oral argument and writing opinions. Of the 5 or 6, I think there's like 1 Republican on there. So it's a very, very liberal Court of Appeals in that First Circuit. So I think that pretty much kind of wraps up some of the big cases. I mean, there's some other stuff, but it was a really good year overall.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good movement here, no doubt about it. There's been a lot of good changes, and but like you said, it all goes back to these individual judges believing that their singular ruling at a lower court somehow rules the land. And
even on the birthright citizenship case, so now, there was language in the Supreme Court opinion that, well, maybe you could try doing it as like a class action. And so I think it was just last week, a judge certified a class and is blocking enforcement, is trying to block enforcement of Trump's executive order. Yeah. It's like they don't learn,
No,
it's
they
like,
don't.
So we'll see what happens, but I have a feeling the Supreme Court's going to reverse that one as well. Trying to go through now as a class action. So I don't think that's going to work.
Let me ask you about your kids and your kids' schooling. How's that going?
So so my daughter just finished high school, but she's homeschooling. She's been homeschooling now for like 3 years, and she got a lot of college credit. She really enjoyed it. She really liked it. I think it was the best decision we ever made. She still sees her friends. I think just a little bit she misses out on, but overall, definitely a net positive. And she's going to be attending school in Seattle Pacific University. Now, where she was very selective on the schools that she was interested in attending, Seattle Pacific had a rule that you could not engage in homosexual activities and things like that on campus. There were some protests against it many years ago, but that got basically, squelched. And so overall, she was pretty selective on the kind of schools that she was interested in attending, and they accept her college credit. She's earned a lot of college credit while she was, those exams that she took, like AP and CLEP and all that stuff. So hopefully she's going to be coming in, I believe, as a sophomore for her freshman year, and she's going to be studying. It's like philosophy, law, and political science. Philosophy, economics, and political science. And she's got her head on her shoulders. So, we did a lot of her views are, I'm very proud of her.
That's awesome.
Put it that way. And my son's finishing up law school. He has 1 year left. So he's going through the summer. He's on a 2-year program at Gonzaga. Yeah, this is his final year. And so he's enjoyed it. It's a 2-year program. He didn't want to be there for 3 years. He wanted to finish as quickly as possible. So that's why he enrolled in their 2-year program. Not many law schools offer that, and that was one of the reasons why he went to Gonzaga. Was because they have a 2-year program, and they're more balanced politically. I think I told you when we visited some of the California law schools how horrible they were.
Yeah.
There was one that was in Southwestern Law School in LA. They had the signs out with like the threat level for COVID. This is in 2024.
Yeah.
Sorry, 2023. This is in 2023. It's like you see at the airports. Like green, red, blah blah blah. I'm like, one of the first things that I said was, "What the hell? What are those signs out there? What are you doing?" "Oh, we work very closely with our county." Why? I know some guy with a mask on. I let him have it, and my son knew right away this wasn't for him. We walk in there, and on the tables, you can select your pronouns. Like as you basically clip it on your shirt, what you want to be known as. And there was like Zerzy.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's like a tag that you could wear. No, this is not the place. It's not for him. And there was another school in California. I think it was Pacific, George Law School, and they also had weird stuff too, and also some weird like vaccine requirements. I'm like, no, not here either. Gonzaga was like the best of the worst.
Gotcha.
They're immortal. But yeah, and he's really, I think he's enjoyed it. I think he enjoyed it. He wants to get out. He wants to work. He doesn't want to be in college.
Sure.
He says it's, that's getting retarded.
Yeah. Good. That's awesome. And he started a conservative group there too, did he not?
He started a group there, but law students are a little bit different than undergrads. I think it's just all the reading they have in law school. They don't want to do any more reading. They don't like Teo wanted to pick some books out and for everyone to read, like at least a chapter and discuss it.
Yeah.
They're not interested. So, but he still remains very close with like the Mises Institute. He's attending a conference. Mises is like really one of the better like think tanks that are out there. They had a revisionist history conference. Ron Unz was invited. So, it's one of the really better ones out there. And so he still stays very close with those people.
Good.
Yeah.
That's cool. Maybe some future connections there.
Exactly. And good ones too.
Yeah,
good connections. Like when I applied for, after I finished law school and I applied in my resume, I put everything down. Like I had, I worked as a radio talk show host one summer. Another one, I worked at a think tank in San Francisco, the Pacific Research Institute. Now they're kind of like, like a Reason or Cato Institute kind of, but it's kind of all we have around here. And I put all that stuff on my resume that I worked on. I worked on like school choice. I worked on ending welfare, stopping discrimination, racial discrimination, or reverse discrimination. I put all of that down. I put down Federalist Society, all that stuff when I was in law school. I did that for a reason. That I knew that if I got a phone call back, that this was maybe a place I wanted to work.
There you go. Yeah.
It was like my way of kind of screening out employers. And and it turned out that my first job, that the partners had very similar views. And they liked it.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Well, cool. I have no doubt it's going to work out for him in the long run, no doubt.
Yeah, I hope so. Yep, yeah. I hope so.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.